Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw for week 39, another 7 curious, interesting and hopefully useful things I've seen last week. So let's crack on. So the first one is software engineer Cameron Hunter and his really nice gesture-based Snapchat lens. So this is relatively easy to make, but it's really novel the way he's done this. So you can now communicate with your colleagues on your conference call using gestures alone, should you want to. So if you want this, you click on the link. You will need Snapchat Lens. Just basically run that in the background, and then in your preferred video conference software, you can probably change the video input from your webcam to essentially Snap Camera. I'm running this right now, so I can say hello, for instance. I can say that is awesome, and likewise, I can also agree. So that's great. Simple as that. Secondly, really interesting thing happened on Twitter. Saw this kicking off this week, and it was really talking about the Twitter algorithm for cropping images. So how does it do it? So if you don't know what this is, if you upload a really weird shaped photo, say a very tall photo with a couple of things in it, what does Twitter do to crop it down? It needs to crop it down, so how does it do that? Does it choose the middle of the image? Does it choose the faces? This initial tweet, obviously there is a picture of Mitch McConnell, and at the bottom of a very tall image is Obama. So which one did it choose? Well, it chose Mitch McConnell. It didn't matter what you did, whether you put it top or bottom, bottom or top, it always chose Mitch McConnell. So clearly, the first cries that went out were, hang on a minute, there is a racist bias to the data, which we have heard a bunch before, so that seemed to be what's going on here. Then people are sort of, well, hang on a minute, I've done a little test, and they basically inverted the images, then all of a sudden Obama got chosen. If you swapped it with a picture of essentially a slightly grumpy Mitch McConnell and a smiling Obama, it chose the smiling person. So maybe it was positivity biased. If you put glasses on Obama, then all of a sudden it chose the glasses. If you put a female versus a male, it would choose the female. If you chose blurred versus sharp, it would choose the sharp. So all of a sudden people are saying, hang on a minute, it's not quite as simple as a gender or a race bias. Even if you chose dogs, it would choose the golden retriever versus the black Labrador, for instance. So people are going, oh, well, hang on a minute, it's even biased to dog colours. So basically it was really interesting. Nobody really knows how this works. Apparently there is some sort of paper out there that explains it, but still nobody could really figure out how it works. So go and follow the thread, because it's really interesting how essentially the world came to the aid of this tweet to try and figure out, and people go, no, I've got this, I've got another one, and all of a sudden more and more doubt got cast on every single experiment. So really interesting. Nobody really knows. Google have erased 22 years of their carbon footprint, and I should explain what that really means. So essentially they have been going for 22 years, and they have paid a huge amount for carbon offsets. So that basically what it says is if they put this year alone nearly $6 billion into carbon offset schemes, so something somewhere in the world that is either absorbing carbon or is planting trees, etc., etc. So essentially they've essentially bought their way out of it, but it's a noble goal. What they're also now doing is saying, right, now that we've essentially every Google search that you've done, every Gmail that you've sent has now essentially been carbon neutral, or theoretically. So now what they said is, now that we've reached that sort of 0 point for the future, we want to be absolutely sustainable. So we want to be 100% solar and wind, store things in batteries when we need to surge, that sort of thing. And they're also building in features, or continue to build in features into their products. So for instance, if you would like to take a flight, you can actually sort by duration, aviation time, whatever, but also the CO2 emissions. So the way they're doing those, you can now search for things like docking points for electric cars or bicycle points in cities. So yeah, going one step beyond, but a really bold and punchy statement to say you've actually erased your entire carbon footprint. I'm a huge Formula One fan, anything with wheels essentially, and or fire. And I'm also an information design geek. That's what my initial training was in. Turns out that in the UK, the average age of a Formula One fan is 40. And if you speak to anybody younger than 25, it pretty much drops off. They just haven't got time for this sort of nonsense, basically. 90 minutes to watch something on a Sunday, nobody's got time for that. So found F1 Visualize, which was really interesting. Essentially, they launch all these on Twitter. So you take the live data from the race, the FIA data, and you plot it real time, but 10 times faster than a real Formula One race. So if you want safety cars, you can see who was in the pit and the safety car. You can see what order they were, what tyres they're on. Essentially 10 times faster. So this is 90 minutes compressed into 90 seconds. So have a look at that. It's really, really cute. I think there's one for MotoGP as well. Really great for information design as well. Really good example of condensing data. There was an Apple event. Now usually these are huge and physical, but now it was virtual. And it was also a little bit of a damp squib, to be fair. I'm sure there were some great products, but I think some had to be pulled at the last minute, so it wasn't quite as big as we were expecting. There were no new Macs, there were no new laptops, there were no Air tags, for instance, which we're expecting, these tracking tags, no iPhone 12, which we were expecting as well. So kind of curious. However, what there was a new update to the Apple Watch 6. Two notable features are oxygen sensing and really deep integration with exercise. So for instance, it can interact with your exercise because it knows how fast you are working, it can change the music, etc. More of that coming later in the year. The iPad Air 4 is essentially the iPad Pro, but downgraded, but still absolutely top of features. So that was a really cool thing. There's also the iPad 8, which was essentially more like the normal iPad. The big thing about those is both of those iPads now use the new Apple processor. So that's big news in that the new Apple processor away from Intel. This is the ARM processor, Apple's own. We were expecting to see this in laptops, for instance. We were waiting to see whether the new MacBook Pro would have this in. So it was a bit of a surprise to find out that it's in an iPad. So that was interesting. However, they did officially announce the A14 Bionic processor. So this is obviously as opposed to the Fusion processor, if you're into your processors. Another big thing was Apple One, which is Apple's bundles and subscription model. So this is no hardware, this is no software, this is literally just bundling things together. So for instance, if you would like your Apple Music, your news, your fitness, your TV, your arcade, and maybe 2 terabytes of data, all of those things Apple can sell you separately, and that would cost you about $55. If you have your new Ultimate bundle, then you can actually get that for about $30. So you'll be saving about $25 there. So cynics would say, well, it's just trying to get people to use all the things that they couldn't sell, things like Apple News. Nobody wanted to buy that. However, it might make sense if you use 2 or 3 of those things. It might make sense to actually go in for the bundle. There you go. So who'd have thought Apple doing bundles? But really interestingly, no iPhone 12. So apparently that's now pushed out to probably November. So watch that space. But there was iOS 14. So if you are an Android fan, Android 11 actually released on the 8th of September. So if you are not aware that there's a new Android version, go and download that. But the features, Android 11, are relatively thin on the ground, really. They're evolution, not revolution. And you could also say that about the iPhone iOS 14 launch. So if you have seen, ironically, anything to do with Android or even Windows Phone over the last 5 years, you'll probably go, yeah, we've seen all these new features. So widgets on the home screen, those sorts of things have been around for ages. If you did want to flex in front of your mates, definitely download it. It does suck your battery, but you can at least say, look, I've got it because I've got widgets on my home page and I can see what the weather is. Great. There's also the privacy integration, which is turned off a little bit, and there'll be more of that next year. But also you can now do things like you can choose your own search engines. So, it's a big update, but really when you get it, it's sort of the same. If you're on a corporate network or you've got a corporate phone, maybe don't download it just yet until all your apps are updated. Because basically what's happened is Apple said, oh, we're going to update it, I think on the Wednesday it was, maybe Thursday of last week, and they gave their developers 24 hours to update all of their apps to be compatible with iOS 14. So some of your apps, when you do download this, might not work, or it might be a little bit cranky for a while. So little bit chaotic. It's getting to be a little bit like Apple, the way they do things now. But anyway, interesting nonetheless. And finally, we have Project Aria from Facebook. So these are essentially the next go at trying to do smart glasses. However, this is going to be Facebook only for now. So instead of say Google Glass from maybe 5-6 years ago, obviously these were colloquially as known as glass holes because basically it was only really annoying people who wore them, quite frankly. So this is slightly different in that the world has moved on. We're probably less worried about it, or at least we're more numb essentially to privacy issues. So these have a red light when they're recording, so you can tell when they're doing that, which obviously Google Glass didn't have. But the goal of these is not really to make them available to everybody. It's to trying to map the world in basically one-to-one detail, so human to life detail. So not like a satellite, not like a car driving down the road, not like somebody with a backpack on their back trying to map sort of local spaces. It's people indoors mapping the world for Facebook. So their goal is to create what they call live maps. So if you've got everybody in the world theoretically wearing these glasses, you should be able to then see what's going on in Times Square in New York right now, or what's going on in Bangladesh right now, for instance, or what's going on in New Zealand. You should be able to go there, see more or less the last version of whatever somebody saw when they walked through that space. So that's what they're after. Clearly, as you're seeing in the video beneath, it's also trying to map sort of 3 levels. One is outside spaces, inside sort of smaller spaces, and then actually personal spaces like homes, etc. Not gyms, not locker rooms, etc. Because the red light will be on, and clearly we all respect that. And a piece of tape won't actually cure that, clearly. So there's lots of privacy issues with this, and it's Facebook. So read into that what you will. However, the aim of trying to map the world in one-to-one detail is really what these are about. So if you're in Seattle or if you're in the Bay Area of San Francisco, you might see a select number of trained Facebook employees wearing these, trying to map the world. So look out for those. And with that, we are done. So I hope that's been enjoyable, and I will see you next week.